Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 159. I am Dave Bryan from SteelersDepot.com, and with me doing the show introduction today, that means the great Alex Kozora is not with us today. Alex is taking the day off to spend with family before training camp gets underway. A well-deserved time off for Alex, and as I mentioned on the Friday episode of the show, joining me today on this kind of sleepy Monday morning, if you will, are Ross McCorkle and Josh Carney from SteelersDepot.com. So with that, happy Monday, Ross and Josh. How are you guys this morning? Thanks for joining me.
Happy Monday. Thank you for having me. Glad we are out of that heat wave that swept across the country. So it feels normal outside again.
I hear you. Ross, how's things going down there in Nash Vegas?
It's good. It was up to 114 with
That's
humidity
crazy.
here the other day, and it was thankfully I didn't have to go outside all that much. But even just taking the dog out, I feel like I was on the brink of death. So
We are in the what we like affectionately call the 100 days of 100 degrees here in Vegas, right? Kind of, I guess the first third of that, the weather doesn't break out in Vegas until right around, I don't know, second week of September and all. So yeah, it's definitely hot out here, but we don't have the humidity you boys have in Pittsburgh and Nashville. That's for sure there. All right, you guys geared up to watch the World Cup USA team tonight?
Certainly, and it doesn't come without any controversy. It's been quite the storyline with Balogun and his red card. It's crazy, but that's FIFA for you.
Yeah, that's FIFA. Rosh, I know you've been following along. I got to admit, I've ended up being a lot more in tune with the World Cup. And look, I watched even the Mexico England game. There's not many of them that I miss at this point here. Quick question with and look, I obviously remember the World Cup being played 4 years ago and all the excitement surrounding that, and it certainly seems like it's double, if not triple, the excitement this time around here. Is this going? Do you think the exposure and the excitement around the World Cup this time around? Do you think it's going to have a bigger impact on U.S. sports and U.S. sports watching, and maybe even the NFL at this point? Do either of you have thoughts on that?
I think that, I mean, it's certainly just with all the social media impressions and stuff. I mean, some of the content that's been coming out of like the Netherlands people like invading Dutch Bros Coffee and sitting on the roof, and the Japanese fans in Texas eating barbecue, and just some of the funny moments that's produced. I think in terms of just like pure social media buzz, I mean, putting it in North America, it couldn't have been a more perfect setup. My take on the popularity of the sport, I think, I don't know, this might just be me, someone who doesn't really love soccer all that much. Watching it, I'm often reminded why I don't watch it, just because I truly don't understand some of the offside stuff. I don't understand how some of the cards get thrown around, the red cards and yellow cards. I don't know if they necessarily do the greatest job at explaining the stuff either. So, like in terms of accessibility for your American who knows nothing about soccer, admittedly, that's me. I don't know if it's doing anything to pull me in where I'm gonna all of a sudden start watching the Premier League, for example.
Right.
But definitely enjoying the World Cup.
Josh, both your boys play, and with having two boys there in the house and all, how are the youth kind of embracing soccer at this point?
Yeah, uh, they really enjoy it. Like I said offline here before the show started, we have a big bracket up in our playroom that my kids every morning they come in and they track the scores from the night before and they update the bracket. they're finding out about players that aren't American born or are on the U.S. roster that they've kind of embraced. Obviously, Messi is someone that my oldest son has always liked, but there's other players that are gaining in popularity, and I hope this helps the sport continue to grow. I do think there's been some issues that might cause casual fans to get caught up on, like the non-calls that are then being reviewed and changed to red cards in the moment. I think that's very hard for some fans to comprehend and understand. But the World Cup, almost every match has been incredible to watch. There's been plenty of drama. There's obviously the star power across the board. I hope it takes off, and I hope someday the U.S. I know this team is pretty good right now. I don't think they're up there with the world powers like a France or an England, a Spain. But I hope eventually they get there, and we get some of these athletes in this country that maybe catch on with soccer here and it takes off. But it's been pretty cool to see the buzz about soccer. Um, grow in the last few weeks. I know that I'm someone that's watched the Premier League for years. I hope the MLS sees an uptick in support and it gets better. Here in North America, because it is a great game. It can be slow at times and confusing, as Ross said, and I think that commentators need to do a better job of explaining some things. But I hope it catches on. It's been a blast to watch these games, day after day, and kind of follow on with the drama.
What years away from even coming close to rivaling the NFL, at least in U.S., right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yes, there's no shot at this point of catching the NFL in at least the next 20 years. But I do hope the one thing that we see from the World Cup. I really want to see Vikings fans borrow the Norway row. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen
Yeah.
that. I think Vikings fans have a real opportunity there. But yeah, soccer can be the quote unquote world's game, but I don't think it's going to come close to touching the NFL anytime soon.
All right, now to on to American football, as opposed to football, going on right now here. But yeah, all of us will be tuned in to the World Cup match against Belgium later on tonight. The biggest, there's not a lot of news, and that's, I guess, both good and bad. It's bad for discussion and maybe site traffic, but good overall for the Steelers because we don't have really any drama going on at this point. I suppose the biggest news coming out of the weekend was the videos of rookie Jeremy Bernard and wide receiver Roman Wilson working with a collective of players working with the route god there, and that surfaced over the weekend. What does that mean? What is there to take from that? And is it good? That I guess that's the main story coming out of this weekend here.
Well, if for nothing else, those two guys are, at least in the eyes of the media right now, and probably what will actually play out, is those two guys are kind of competing for that wide receiver 3 job. And so it's nice to see them spending time together, and it's not going to turn into some kind of adversarial relationship between the two.
Right.
They're sharpening each other off the field, and hopefully that'll carry over into camp. Route God, an interesting. I think Deontay Johnson still works with him very heavily, so they've probably been working with Johnson. And say what you want about Johnson, but he was always a good route runner, and it's probably good to pick up on stuff from him as well. And so, only positives I see from Bernard working with Route God. Route God works with a ton of guys, and I don't know if you guys saw this a few weeks ago. He was criticizing some drill that some team was having their players do, and why. I can't remember. I don't know if you guys are tracking with what I'm saying, but it was some drill one of the teams was having their receivers do, and he was explaining why that drill made no sense. And I thought it was kind of interesting. I tried reaching out to him and see if I could get an interview on the books. Maybe that'll happen later this summer, maybe not. But I think nothing but good seeing Bernard out there working.
And normally it isn't till like the second seasons that you see these young wide receivers work with him, and obviously they you would think it comes with a cost along with it. So I think more than anything the fact that especially with him having to go through the pre-draft process and everything that goes along with that, that he's already taken it upon himself to get that kind of work in. with someone such as the route god there, at even ahead of his first official NFL training camp there. Josh, any thoughts on the fact that they're working together with route god?
No, I love it. I mean, you get some of these personal trainers throughout the summer. Some players aren't doing actual football drills in these situations, but Route God does a really good job of building true receiver drills into the workload. Some of these receivers aren't going to have a ton of time to show off all this great footwork in actual routes within games, but I think this is a great thing, especially having Roman Wilson working with Jeremy Bernard. As Ross mentioned, these two are going to kind of compete head to head for that wide receiver 3 role in training camp, but there seems to be a strong relationship there. I believe it was Bernard a few weeks ago during minicamp had praised Wilson just for his leadership and how he'd welcomed him into the receiver room and had kind of been that sounding board for him to help him, get underway in his NFL career. So it's good to see these two working, and I think it's a nice feather in the cap for Roman Wilson as a leader. He hasn't done much in the NFL to this point, but he's doing all the right things behind the scenes. He's putting in the time and effort, and hopefully it pays off for him. And I think this is only going to make the Steelers receiver room stronger entering the season.
Agreed. All right. Was there any other news that I missed or anything worth talking about coming out of the weekend, Steelers related or notable here?
I don't think so. I mean, it's just been so quiet. I think we're all just waiting on pins and needles here for the Joey Porter Jr. extension news. Hopefully that happens before training camp, but it seems like that might not happen until we get to Latrobe. But yeah, it's very quiet right now, and it was kind of quiet last summer, and then I think, as Ross wrote last week, Omar Khan made the splash last summer. Maybe he's got something up his sleeve here.
Both of you would probably agree that when it comes to Porter, and Alex and I have hit on this. I mean, there really hasn't been anything to report overall when it comes to
Mhm.
that there. But would both of you agree it's just a matter of when and not if when it comes to the Porter extension?
Yeah, I think it's going to be whichever of those three cornerbacks, whether it's Porter or Christian Gonzalez, or I'm drawing a blank on the third one. I know.
Witherspoon.
Yes, whichever one of those three blanks first, and then I think they're all going to happen in succession, and it's just a matter of when.
And then, well, obviously with the other two there, you got fifth year options that could play into it
Hmm.
there is a chance both of them end up having to wait till next year. Ross, is it a matter of when, not if, when it comes to the Joey Porter Jr. extension? And do you think this will leak a little into maybe the start of training camp with one of those newfangled hold-ins with him?
Yeah, I'd say with like a 95% plus certainty that it is when and not if, but there is that small part of me that wonders if he really is expecting to reset this market, is that realistic? And if I was in charge, would I be comfortable doing that? I think the Steelers ultimately would, just because of how long it's been since they've drafted and developed a corner, and
Right.
you just don't let those premium positions walk when a player is kind of ascending still. Porter very well could end up being one of those top 5 kind of guys. But there is, I guess, some small semblance of doubt. But I mean, I would be pretty surprised if he does not sign.
Yeah, I think the big thing with him, I would be quite surprised if the moment he signs the contract, assuming he does sign the extension this offseason, if he is at the time, from a average per year standpoint, is deemed the highest paid cornerback in the league. I can foresee, however, it being top 3 potentially, and I do wonder the guaranteed money aspect if that might be holding things up. And look, the Steelers, and I make sure to reiterate this when we talk about him. The Steelers have the franchise tag that they can use against Porter as well too at this point now, and I suspect in some aspects that will be used. And Porter decides that he doesn't want to sign a contract extension, whatever that best offer might be from the Steelers this offseason. Really realistically, the max, if he ends up getting the franchise tag and then having to play under that a year from now, you're looking at a max of him earning, probably mid 30 million mark over the course of the next 2 seasons, because he's set to earn a little over 3 million this year. And then the franchise tag, who knows what it will be a year from now, maybe around somewhere around the 30 million mark there. And that a lot of times that can be used as the incentive to get the deal done. But until something happens there's really nothing to report other than speculation on all of our ends here and I think and I'm obviously with you guys. I think it'll get done at some point. I do wonder at this point if it will roll into the start of training camp, but Omar Khan has, yeah, I think he's got, at least in his short track record at this point now, since becoming the GM, that he'd rather get these things done sooner rather than later. Where do Keanu Benton is the other guy that we're kind of watching in the peripheral as far as potential extension. I've gone on record with Alex at this point of thinking that I'll be really surprised if they get something done with him. Uh, I I don't know if at this point I'm the minority when it comes to you guys, but do you guys think that they'll get something done with Benton before week 1?
I mean, I would say just the timing of the 3 deals they've already gotten done, and with Washington and Herbig and Boswell, I would have thought if Benton was part of the plans, they probably would have gotten that one out of the way and that run of contracts. I know that doesn't guarantee anything, but yeah, at this point, I would be kind of surprised if Benton gets done. I think that the Steelers are wisely wanting to see what he can do outside of maybe the nose tackle position. I know he has played kind of multiple positions, but maybe a bit more of an emphasis there this year. They've talked about maybe moving him, more of a 3 or even a 4 eye tech at times. And if you're going to have Y.A. Black, kind of the main guy at nose, I just struggle to see why you would pay him if you don't have all the information in front of you. How's he going to operate in this new system with a new defensive line coach? How's he going to respond to that? I think you could still potentially retain him next year if say he has a good season. I think you could potentially offer him, a nice offer next year and still retain him. I think Dr. Melanie Friedlander, her terrible take was about that yesterday, and I tend to agree. It doesn't mean that he's for sure gone if they don't extend him now, but I just don't see it happening before the start of the season.
Josh, where are you on Benton right now in the contract?
Yeah, I've gone back and forth, but I'm with Ross. I think I'd like to wait and see what he looks like, under Domino Pecco and obviously Patrick Graham, and how they want to use him, how he performs. Maybe if he's playing that base defensive end role at times to give Derek Harmon and Cameron Hayward a break. I hesitate to throw a lot of money at a guy that you just don't know what his true fit is moving forward. I think he's a solid player. He's come along nicely in his career, but I think that's a guy that you wait and see how he performs this season, and then you can go to him before free agency opens. You'll have the chance to retain him, and you give him an offer to try and keep him if he has a good year. If not, you let him walk. And again, that would push defensive line up into a major draft need once again, but this team has done a decent job in recent years of investing in the trenches and finding those pieces, and I think they have a nice core to lean on outside of Benton. So I wouldn't throw money at him right now, just to make sure he's locked in place. I would let it play out.
I wrote several weeks ago now at this point, well before even Herbig got extended there, right at kind of around draft time, I think, or shortly thereafter, that I thought it was in the best interest of Benton to potentially not sign a deal this offseason, for the sheer fact that I think if he plays well throughout this season, I think he could potentially wind up being one of the top free agent defensive tackles on the market in unrestricted free agency in 2027. And then also, being as how he has moved up and down the line, not only back in college, but with the Steelers as well too. His best fit long term might actually be with the four down, four a 4-3 kind of primary team as more of a defensive tackle. But we'll wait. Once again, there's been no movement or no real strong talks about whether or not he'll get extended this offseason. So we'll sit and wait to see what the outcome is on that. Ross, you had a very interesting post go up on Steelers Depot, I think a couple of days ago here, ranking Omar Khan's 2026 offseason moves, and I wanted to kind of get a little bit into the weeds and that kind of parlay that into a certain aspect, specifically on the offensive and defensive side of football here. Overall, you have the hiring of Mike McCarthy as the number one move, and I know this isn't all Omar Khan's decision here, but he did really vouch for Mike McCarthy during the time he spent with them many moons ago in New Orleans. So I understand why you kind of included the Mike McCarthy hiring in there. I think number 2 on the list was the team trading for Michael Pittman. Number 3, I'm not going to give away the whole list here, but extending Darnell Washington this offseason. Number 4 was re-signing Aaron Rodgers, and then number 5 was extending Nick Herbig here. And then the rest of it, you get into a lot of these free agent additions that the team has made. Looking at the draft class, obviously the drafting of Drew Aller, extending Boswell, and things of that. It was quite a long list, 18 deep topic points to go over when it comes to Omar Khan here in the offseason moves the team has made. I wanted to kind of hyper focus in on the outside additions, non-draft class related here as far as Omar Khan and the job that he's done this offseason. And I wanted to start on the offensive side of football. And look, I mean, you look at Ross's list here in trading for Michael Pittman Jr., not not termed a free agent signing, but obviously bringing in a player from outside the organization. We can work around the trading aspect for it. Why is the addition of Michael Pittman Jr. the biggest, at least player outside off-season addition that this team has made in your eyes when it comes to Omar Khan?
Well, if you look at Omar Khan's kind of I guess it's been 5 years now since 2022 after the draft, so 4 and some change years. His biggest issue of the last 2+ years has really been finding a suitable wide receiver too. Really, ever since they traded away Deontay Johnson, they created that hole, and they tried so many different things to fill that and failed, and the offense paid for it big time. I mean, I think back to when George Pickens missed a couple of games with, what was that, a hamstring or whatever it was, and just how flat the offense was, and it never really recovered. You look at when DK Metcalf faced his suspension last year, and kind of what the offense looked like as a result. You even look at DK Metcalf's production last year. They paid him top 5 wide receiver money at the time when he signed the contract, and he did not live anywhere close to up to that last year. And I think a big part of that is not having a suitable wide receiver 2 opposite him. I mean, attracting attention away from him, etc. It's a lot easier to care about one threat like DK Metcalf when you don't have a Pittman or, even this year, Bernard, whatever, taking attention away. And so finally filling that hole and doing it for relatively cheap. Now, I understand that he was paid money. That part wasn't cheap. But if you're just looking at the trade portion of the deal, that was, basically for free. What'd they give up? It was a 6th round pick or something like that for him. So it was peanuts compared to what you'd normally expect for a guy who spent, however many years as kind of a wide receiver 1 in Indianapolis. And the Steelers got him. I mean, they've desperately needed a chain mover, and that's what I see Michael Pittman Jr. as. This is a guy who catches, roughly 90 catches per year over the last 4 years. Pittsburgh really hasn't had anybody that's capable of doing that since, I guess, Deontay Johnson. So I just see it as a kind of fulfillment of Omar Khan's biggest bugaboo over his tenure as the general manager.
$24 million in cash. It's going to cost the Steelers for Pittman in 2026. Obviously, the rest of his contract by year when it comes to cash is cheaper than that. But they definitely made another investment, and for a second offseason in a row because of going out trading for DK Metcalf. A year ago, I think we just moved past. Oh no, I think that was a little bit earlier in the offseason there, but it obviously was last season that DK Metcalf was acquired via the trade. They turn around and give him a top 3 wide receiver contract on top of it. Look, there's not a lot of offensive players that the team brought in really from the outside, for big dollars this past offseason. You did have the Rico Dowdle addition via free agency that's in the mix there. I mean, really, who else did this team really add on the offensive side of football? So, Ross, could you make any sort of an argument against Pittman being the biggest and most important outside ad on offense? And really, I guess your other only option would be Rico Dowdle there.
Yeah, I think Rico Dowdle has a chance to potentially could have a bigger impact this year. Alex wrote about, and I think Josh and Alex kind of brought this conversation about last week on the podcast when you were away, that Dowdle can break a record having a third 1,000-yard rushing season with a third team, which is very impressive. And I really think he's in line to do that. He's the kind of back that Pittsburgh hasn't had in a while. And if you look at his kind of prime play last year, I think one of the ESPN guys compared it to prime Marshawn Lynch. I don't know if I would go that high, but it really was pretty amazing. Those month of play that he had last year before Carolina kind of inexplicably diminished his role down the stretch. I could see people making the case for Rico Dowdle being more important. The only reason I put it further down on the list is just because, Jalen Warren, I believe in him. I think that if you're talking about like replacement value, obviously not having Michael Pittman Jr. would be much worse than not having Rico Dowdle this year. I think you'd kind of have the replacement value from Warren. If you didn't have Pittman, I think you'd be in a lot more trouble.
Josh, where do you come in on Pittman and Dowdle as far which one are we more likely to be talking about later on in the season, at the conclusion of the regular season, of having the biggest impact as an outside of addition for this team from this past offseason?
I still think it's going to be Pittman. Again, they had a significant hole at wide receiver too. They've had that for years. I mean, last year we were hoping that Adam Thielen and Marquez Valdez-Scantling could plug that hole. They went out and got a receiver in Pittman who's proven. He's quarterback proof in that sense. He's had a number of changing parts at quarterback in his time in Indianapolis, and all he did was produce consistently year after year. I don't think he's going to put up monster numbers here in Pittsburgh, but I think he's going to be a very dependable wide receiver too. He's going to make some big plays in key spots. And that's not to say Dowdle won't. I just think Pittman and his impact in the receiver room as that wide receiver too is going to be greater than Dowdle will be splitting time with Jalen Warren. I did love the Dowdle addition. I do think that he can kind of be the 1A in the backfield in Pittsburgh, and I do think that he'll get very close to 1,000 yards on the ground again. But Pittman, the size of the hole the Steelers had at wide receiver too, and especially in a passing league at this point, and then you bring in Mike McCarthy. Obviously, that need was greater with a passing offense like McCarthy's. I just think Pittman is what this team needed, and I think he's going to show that throughout the year.
Do you guys, and I'll go back to Josh for this one first to chime in here. How do you see the split going between Dowdle and Jalen Warren? And is it reasonable to expect neither one of those two guys to hit 1,000 yards rushing, barring injury to maybe the other one?
Yeah, Alex and I kind of had this discussion. I think it was last Friday, and I still think it's Dowdle is going to be that 1A, whether it's 60-40 or 55-45. I still think Dowdle's going to be the leading rusher, and I think Warren's going to slide back more to that third down role. I think obviously we all know how great Jaylen Warren is as a pass protector, and I think he's incredibly invaluable there. It felt like the Steelers were missing that at times last year with Kenneth Gainwell kind of being that third down guy and the pass catcher out of the backfield. I think Warren can be close to what Gainwell was as the receiver out of the backfield. I think he can create more explosive plays as kind of that check down option. But Dowdle just fits what McCarthy's looking for, is that downhill runner between the tackles. Obviously, he has the experience in McCarthy's scheme. I don't think it's going to be a drastic split. I think it's going to be very close. I don't think Warren is going to come close to the rushing yards he had last year, but I do think Dowdle is going to push close to 1,000 yards. Hesitant to say he's going to crack it just because I think it's hard to say a guy's going to make NFL history for sure. But if the Steelers play the way McCarthy has talked this offseason, I think Dowdle has a really good shot of making NFL history and cracking 1,000 yards again.
Ross, where do you come in on that same topic / question?
Well, just looking at Mike McCarthy's history of splitting up labor between two running backs, it wasn't that favorable for a 50-50 split between Warren and Dowdle. I think he had 1 year in Dallas where I'm trying to scroll to my Twitter. Oh, I found it. Perfect. There was 1 year in Dallas in 2022 where Ezekiel Elliott and Pollard had a split of 51.7 to 48.3 to each other. The other years, it was extremely lopsided. The running back one had, on average, like a lower 70%, upper 60% split of the share, and the second guy had a much lower. That would put him in like the 20%, 25, 30% range. And so I'm kind of hoping, part of me is, I would like to see it be a 2022 Dallas Cowboys split where it's relatively even, because I think Jaylen Warren doesn't deserve to have a diminished role. But part of me worries that they could ride the hot hand. Mike McCarthy could fall back on what he's done in the past, and you could see Dowdle have like a 70, not quite as high as 70, but could you see like a 66, like a 2/3 Dowdle to 1/3 Warren? History says that that's possible.
All right. Good input there from you on that. Now, when we move to the defensive side of football, a lot more, quite a few more off-season additions from the outside here. Look, we're talking about Jaquan Brisker. We're talking about Jamel Dean. Who else? Sebastian Joseph Day. I think you could even go as we'll see what happens with Darnell Savage if he's able to link on here. Trying to see if I missed anyone else within here. But Ross, you had Jaquan Brisker as technically your biggest outside addition move that Omar Khan has made. So this offseason here, and ranked him even higher than the Jamel Dean by I think 2 spots on your list here. Why is Jaquan Brisker? Why potentially is he the biggest outside addition on a defensive side of football by Omar Khan this offseason?
Yeah, I view Brisker as a kind of young and ascending player still, and Jamel Dean is going to turn 30 in, October, I believe. And so you got another corner. I mean, the Steelers' history, maybe I might just have PTSD of signing guys like Patrick Peterson and Darius Slay. And I know obviously Dean isn't that old, but you look at a guy who ran like a 4.3 40 back when he entered the league, Jamel Dean. You do start to worry when a guy gets up to 30 that he loses some of that athleticism, and then how does their game kind of translate as some of the physical skills diminish? I still have high hopes for Jamel Dean, and I think he will be good, but part of me worries about the age aspect of it. On the other hand, Brisker is still, 27, I think, still a young ascending player. They got him for cheap, and what I really think he can do is kind of free up this defense to be what they hoped it could be last year. And obviously it's going to be a different system, but Patrick Graham should have everything he needs to really make that secondary very confusing for opposing offenses. Jaquan Brisker can play in the slot. Jaquan Brisker can play at safety. You kind of have a similar thing with Jalen Ramsey, and so how they use those two interchangeably, I think, is going to give offenses a lot of issues. And so I just see him as a force that can unlock things for the Steelers defense. And again, back to the same conversation of replacement value. I just viewed, what they have behind Jamel Dean maybe a little bit better than what they have behind Brisker at safety, given the safety room's probably one of the thinner on the roster.
Josh, can you make an argument, maybe specifically for either Jamel Dean or Sebastian Joseph Day as being, maybe a better signing than Jaquan Brisker?
Yeah, I think with Sebastian Joseph Day, just looking at Ross's list, I would have had Day over Dean, and I think you can make a debate with Brisker. Joseph Day can play up and down the line of scrimmage. We've seen some attrition hit the Steelers' defensive line at times in recent years. Cam Hayward, as great as he is, he's not getting any younger. There's questions about Keeanu Benton that we just talked about previously. Y.A. Black going into year 2, what's that look like? Same with Derek Harmon. Joseph Day is proven, and he's been a productive piece everywhere he's gone. And games are won and lost in the trenches. I know that sounds cliche. It is a cliche, but that's how it is in today's NFL. And Joseph Day has a chance, even in a rotational role, to be an incredibly impactful piece. With Brisker, yeah, he can move all around. I still wonder what his true role is, whether that's at free, whether he's the box safety and Deshaun Elliott plays more free. I don't feel great about Brisker in the slot, but again, he can do it. I just wonder what his role is. And I'm kind of with Ross with Dean. I have some of that PTSD. I talked about that with Alex last week, where it's not fair to Dean because he's not Darius Slay. He's not, Dante Jackson. But, in 2024, Dean had a very, very poor year and I believe he took a pay cut because it was, you do that or you're gone. And then he parlayed into a huge 2025 season. So it's a bit of a roller coaster with Dean, and I just worry that, maybe because he was facing that contract year, he had the huge year, and he is another year older, and at a key position like cornerback, do things fall off? So Joseph Day, though, I've always liked his game from afar. I remember him coming up with the Rams. It was, who the heck is this guy? And he really has put together a strong career for himself. And I'm excited to see what he can do in Pittsburgh. I kind of have him right in lockstep with Brisker, but no overall real qualms with Ross's layout here.
I think, and I've said this I think really Sebastian Joseph Day is one of these underrated kind of additions, specifically on a defensive side of football. Now, look, do we expect him to log 700 snaps on a defensive side of football? Probably not, barring injuries there. But I mean, if you got in a situation where you'd lost maybe, let's say, a Cam Hayward or a Keanu Benton or God forbid, Derek Harmon for any amount of games, I think he's a guy that could fit right in there and give you the necessary snaps, at least in a short-term process. There, I don't think any of us want or expect, once again, Sebastian Joseph Day to log in the 700 snap category. I think the last 2 seasons he's been just a little shy of 500 defensive snaps. He might be hard pressed to even hit that snap total as a member of the Steelers here. And really the only way I think that we're talking about Sebastian Joseph Day after the 2026 season as being what a monumental addition to the Steelers would be if indeed he has to play a lot of snaps because of injury. But I do, and I talked about pre free agency and all, how I wanted this team to go out and address the defensive tackle position in free agency, regardless of what happens during the draft there. And I think Sebastian Joseph Day was a great ad, but once again, I don't think as far as significant, I like the ad. I think I think he's, I'm with, I think Josh, I might have ranked him a spot higher than Jamel Dean, but I think I'd be splitting hairs. In fact, Ross has him number 8, number 9. Dean's one spot ahead of Joseph Day on his list there, but I like that addition. Looking at it in totality, when you look at the offseason that the Steelers had and the work Omar Khan has done, and you look at this draft class, and you look at the players that were cut, you look at the amount of cash that this team is spending, which is really quite high and probably going to come in quite significantly higher than what I envision it being. Is there anything else Omar Khan could have done, that you would have liked to have seen done by Omar Khan at this point of the offseason based on the 91 man roster where it sits right now? Ross?
I guess my biggest qualm and I mean the 2026 draft class, I like it as a whole. I like some individual picks, but you just look at what the class can offer this year and Bernard has a good shot at contributing. Ihanacher has a good shot at contributing. Hopefully Weegan in the return game. Maybe Dalen Everett. I mean, it's hard to see anywhere near the level of rookie participation of the last couple seasons or few seasons. I feel like Omar Khan's draft classes have generally participated quite a bit in their rookie seasons. This year, I have a hard time seeing that be the case. Hopefully Ihanacher catches on sooner rather than later. And so I just think entering the class with 12 picks, he probably could have done a little bit more moving and shaking. I did like the move to trade up for Jeremy Bernard, but I think that they could have been slightly more aggressive, and I think that class was a little bit lackluster compared to the 12 picks expectations that I had, and maybe that was just me, but I think as a whole, putting this list together, what I realized is that there really weren't any moves that I was like, oh man, why did he do that? You have to rank the list 1 to 18, and so just by nature of it, 18 is like the quote unquote worst move, but pretty quickly I got to like extending Chris Boswell as one of the quote unquote worst moves, and I don't dislike that move at all. So really looking at the totality of it, I think Omar Khan had a pretty good offseason. It wasn't the flashiest thing ever, but he filled the holes, he bolstered the depth, and he, put this roster in probably the best spot that it's been in. And I don't know, since 2018, maybe? Is that the last time the roster was this complete? So I think he did a good job.
Josh, where are you on this 91 man roster right now? Could Omar Khan done any more? And where were you, I guess, kind of a threefold question, I guess, but where were you coming out of the 2025 season as far as what the potential of the 91 man roster would look like at this time of year and where it is now?
I like this roster overall. I think you can always look at the quarterback position and say, was that the right decision there, bringing back Rodgers, considering what was out there, Kyler Murray, Malik Willis, especially knowing what you got from Rodgers coming out of the playoff loss. I, I'm okay with the offseason with Khan. I would have liked to have seen inside linebacker addressed at some point, whether it was in free agency or through the draft. I think running it back with those 5, I have some concerns there. Obviously, the Steelers are banking on Patrick Graham getting those guys to play better because last year was just not good enough from Queen and Peyton Wilson. And, Cole Holcomb was a surprise re-signing, especially on a 2-year deal. That was an underwhelming group. And then obviously we saw what they did in the pre-draft process with how much work they were doing on that position. And then to not get one of those guys was a little underwhelming. So that's the one position I have circled. I get some pushback at punter, but I didn't quite understand the Cameron Johnston move, especially that early in free agency. I mean, you cut him last last training camp for a reason. And then he bounced around the league and dealt with some injuries last year. So I'm concerned there. But again, this team has gotten by in the recent years with issues at punter. So I like the roster overall. I thought coming out of the 2025 season, I thought for sure, especially after Mike Tomlin resigned, that was it for Rodgers, and it was time to rip the Band-Aid off at quarterback and go young and find that franchise guy. And it feels like they're kind of stuck in between right now in 2026. But again, Rodgers knows the locker room. He has the familiarity with Mike McCarthy. You just hope that he can stay healthy this year and the passing game can be a bit better. But there's no real holes on this roster where you're like, man, they have to do something here at cut down or a surprise trade in training camp. I think Omar Khan and Andy Weidel have done a really good job of putting together a deep roster for McCarthy and his staff, and now it's up to that new coaching staff to get the best out of a veteran group.
Ross, what with training camp now, 3.5, 4 weeks away from getting underway, and things will move fairly quickly from that point forward. I don't know. I imagine we'll have both you guys on as some sort of maybe roundtable before the regular season gets underway here. But in the meantime, at this point right now in time, Ross, what is your number one concern about the Steelers on offense, and the number one concern about the defense ahead of training camp getting underway?
I'll start with defense, and I think Josh just kind of hit on it, but it's inside linebacker for me. I think on one hand, you have two guys who are projected to start who have a lot to play for this year. You got Peyton Wilson, who could potentially make himself a lot of money, and Patrick Queen's trying to shake off some of the negativity surrounding him and get back to being the kind of premium free agent that he was just a few years ago. And so, that could be a good setup for the Steelers. And you see things like what Patrick Queen talked about, playing through some, quite a few injuries last year. And, I think that there's hope for that group to be much better than last year, and some of that is tied to the play of the defensive line, Derek Harmon, Y.A. Black, maybe getting a year better and all that'll certainly help free up those inside linebackers. But it does concern me, and especially if one of those guys get injured, or if Peyton Wilson shows once again that he's not ready for an every down role. What does that even mean this time around? Are you going to Cole Holcomb only played a couple hundred snaps last year. I don't know if I'm really signing myself up for Malik Harrison playing a ton of snaps. So I think things could kind of unravel at inside linebacker in a hurry, and we've seen that with the Steelers too many times over the last however many years. I think back to, what was that, 2 or 3 years ago, where like 9 different guys started at inside linebacker because of so many different injuries and whatnot. But that's definitely it for me on defense. On offense, I think that the offensive line has to be talked about here just because of the fact that, man, you're really only starting Zach Frazier in his same position. And how excited are we about potentially Spencer Anderson starting at right guard for an extended period of time? I think he's a fine player. I think he played well in the tackle eligible extra lineman role. I don't know if I'm necessarily signing up for a full season of him at starting right guard. How quickly is Maxi Honicher going to step in? I think there's a lot of newness, and I think, you really like to see cohesion across the offensive line. That matters almost more than anything, that they're working in concert with each other. And I struggle to see that being the case, at least early on, just with literally everybody switching position or being new to the team or whatever it is. A lot of those guys have played left tackle or left guard in college, and Dylan Cook has experience being kind of a swing tackle. I get that it's not like a complete restart for these guys, but there is still an adjustment period, and I do worry about kind of what that means early on. And if you're going to have an offensive line that's maybe kind of suspect early on, that's probably not a great thing for a 43-year-old quarterback. And what might that mean for the team if Rodgers gets hurt in the first couple weeks because, whoops, the offensive line missed an assignment. And next thing you know, the season that they've gone all in on is basically shot. So that's my biggest concern.
Josh, biggest concern on offense and defense ahead of training camp getting underway when looking forward to the 2026 season?
Yeah, similar to Ross's. The offensive line and the moving parts, I'm not all that concerned with overall, but I am worried about the right guard position because it's just there's a lot of uncertainty. Obviously, Dylan Cook, he called right tackle his natural position. I thought he showed flashes at left tackle last year, late in the year, that has me excited for his potential early this season. And obviously, Max Johannichor is waiting in the wings. And the more I watch him and learn more about him, the more I like him. Right guard, though, I'm concerned there. Spencer Anderson and Brock Hoffman are going to kind of compete there. You'd hope Jennings Dunker gets into that mix there, but there was that report that he was working at left guard in OTAs and minicamp, so that raises a red flag. But I think going from Mason McCormick at right guard and having him move to left guard, there's a hole at right guard that I don't feel great about at this point. I do like Brock Hoffman. I think he's a better fit in McCarthy's scheme. I think he brings that nasty edge that this offensive line needs to lean into. Whereas Spencer Anderson's a good athlete. I have concerns there at right guard, and I think that could be the true weak link on this offensive line that really could derail things and lead to a messy situation, as Ross hinted at. Defensively, it's inside linebacker for me as well. I have a hard time sitting here looking at this depth chart and looking at the defense as a whole and seeing how much they invested on that side of the ball this offseason, again with extensions and free agency signings, and going, wow, the weakest link on that defense from last year is the same group of players again entering this year. And again, as I talked about, Patrick Graham's the defensive coordinator. Maybe he schemes things up better and frees guys up like Queen and Wilson to make more plays. And, Holcomb showed some flashes last year in the snaps that he got. I never understood the Malik Harrison signing. I still don't feel great about him as a depth piece. I feel like that's a position they could add to early in training camp. And maybe I write about this later on this week, but Landon Roberts is still out there, and he has familiarity with Patrick Graham, and he's played in Pittsburgh, and he kind of fits what the team needs, which is that old school downhill thumper. But that's the weak link for me right now on defense, where the cornerbacks look great. The safety room looks much improved. Defensive line, they've invested so much in, and it looks very promising. And then you've got that group of edge rushers that is arguably the best in the league, but that inside linebacker room, there's talent there, but they have just not put it together, and they're coming off a really poor season, and I have major, major concerns with that group of personnel there.
Kind of my theme along those same lines and answering those questions. Look, it goes without saying you got to have good quarterback play on offense if your offense is going to do anything. That's kind of a captain obvious thing here. But Aaron Rodgers, how much better can Aaron Rodgers be than he was last season? And I do worry about the durability concerns overall with him. Will we see him be more willing to hold on to the football a little bit more? Will he be able to push the football down the field with more regularity through the air than last couple seasons been able to, most notably last season there? How is this team going to get explosive plays specifically through the air in 2026, and especially if they don't have kind of this team was good after the catch last season. I don't know if they can depend on it quite to the level that they did last season, and can they depend on the backs producing as much as they did in the passing game there? So I just think, number one, Aaron Rodgers, and it's easy to say that to point towards a quarterback when it comes to any NFL team and the prospects on having a good season on offense. So my concerns still lay around how much better, once again, can Aaron Rodgers be than he was last year. Then on the defensive side of football, just in general, just up the middle of the spine, and that of course means the inside linebacker play as well too. If they can get solid play up the middle of this defense, I think, especially with Patrick Graham now being the defensive coordinator, I expect a more kind of organized too deep shell within this. If the up front can stay healthy on the defensive line and get the quality of play out of that unit, and look, you've got 3 quality edge rushers that you can rotate through, of keeping those guys healthy there. I think the defense is going to have to, in my opinion, more than pull their weight in 2026 for this team to be able to win 10, 11, 12 games, and then more notably make noise in the playoffs. So that's kind of where I am, and that's kind of been the theme that I've had on this team, throughout most of the offseason here. All right, let's move forward into knocking out some of these 90 and 30 series players that I have. And the next 3, I think, where Alex and I left off here are Alex Highsmith, Brock Hoffman, and Cole Holcomb. Alex Highsmith, missed 4 games, I think, in 2025 due to various injuries. He still managed to register 9.5 sacks, to pair with 40 total tackles. That production that he had came in just 634 total defensive snaps overall there. He dealt with ankle and pectoral injuries were to blame for him missing those 4 games last year. You also had, I think Alex and I covered several times that I think there were only 8 total games last season that the Steelers had all 3 of their outside linebackers active for at the same time in games. So that's something else to think about moving forward here. Hopefully they can keep all 3 of those guys healthy and missing maybe at most 1 game a piece during the season. His defensive grade, talking about Alex Highsmith, was strong, I think. I think Alex Highsmith is, and I think we got an email from one of the listeners in a recent show there. I think I don't think Steelers fans appreciate him enough. Yeah, I get the fact that he's dealt with some injuries, the last several seasons here, but he was ranked defensive grade of, not that it means much, 82.9 from Pro Football Focus there. One of the biggest things there, he logged 88%, 81% of total snaps played the last couple of seasons here. Realistically, I think he might only play around, if things go great, especially with Herbig getting more money, expecting more playing time, around 70% of all defensive snaps. I still think Highsmith is a very reputable and strong player in the NFL at this point in time, and I think it would help him to play maybe a little bit fewer snaps overall. You look at his pressure rate last season; he led the Steelers in defensive linemen and outside linebackers in sack rate. Quarterback pressure rate at 14.5%. Quick quarterback pressures, he had 21 of those in 2025. Still decent when asked to drop into coverage in some zone looks as well too, and occasional man coverages there. I mean, you could do a lot worse for having Alex Highsmith as a potential starter for another 17 games opposite T.J. Watt, and on top of it here, it's going to be interesting to see how they use this rotation and mix Herbig into it a little bit more this season. So with that, I'll turn it over to both of you guys. What are you expecting for Alex Highsmith in 2026? Is 9-10 sacks very reasonable for him? What are the expectations?
Yeah, I think 9 to 10 sacks is very reasonable for Alex Highsmith. I think a lot of Steeler fans are forgetting how solid this guy is. He's not a star, but he does everything really well. The only issue that really Alex Highsmith has in his game is the lack of availability at times. The guy just struggles to stay healthy, with whether it's soft tissue injuries or ankle injuries in the past that have knocked him out of games. But when he is on the field, he is a very good player for the Steelers. He's a formidable pass rusher, as we've seen. He really does well in those one-on-one matchups with the attention paid to T.J. Watt. I think Highsmith is an underrated run defender. It feels like at times when the Steelers are struggling to stop the run, he gets unfairly criticized as the culprit. But I really like Highsmith's game overall. Hopefully he stays healthy enough this year. He plays 15 or so games and can be on the field in those 3 outside linebacker situations with Herbig and Watt. But 9 to 10 sacks feels like a really good spot for Highsmith. Hopefully he can get an interception or two there as well. He's a good coverage linebacker, and I think the Steelers are going to drop their outside linebackers a bit more under Patrick Graham to switch things up. But this guy is so solid. He just has to stay on the field more often in his career. But I feel like he's vastly underrated by Steelers fans. And after the Herbig extension, everyone was trying to push him out. It felt like, and the guys in that locker room, when they talk about Highsmith, I think they realize how valuable he is and how important he is to the defense and how good he is. And hopefully he's able to show that again this year.
Ross, are we overselling Alex Highsmith to any degree?
Honestly, I might be underselling in my mind, because I think he 9 or 10 sacks, really, if he's healthy for a full 17 games, that's kind of where I see his floor in my head. I mean, you look back to that season where he only had like 7 sacks, but his pressure stats that year were absurd in a 17-game season. He just wasn't getting those sacks to fall for whatever reason. And I remember putting together one of those kind of like regression charts. And if you looked at sacks versus total pressures, Highsmith was like way below the trend line, meaning that, for whatever reason, he really was due for quite a few more sacks. And that was after the year where he had 14 and a half. And, the story the last 2 years since then has been he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And yeah, you say he missed 4 games. He really kind of missed 5 games last year, because he only played, I think he only had 5 pass rush snaps in that Seahawks game before he got hurt. And so you barely count that as a game, and you start to contextualize the numbers of him getting 9.5 sacks in 12 games. Basically 12 games worth of snaps. And man, I really still think it feels like every offseason I'm writing something about Alex Highsmith prime for takeoff. And if you look at the kind of the advanced metrics of it all, this is a player who really is capable of like a 12, 13 plus sack kind of season. And I think it's just been a matter of time, a matter of luck of staying healthy. And I think this, maybe you do lower his total reps a little bit. People forget he played over 900 total snaps 3 years in a row before these last 2 years where he's been dinged up. So he really wasn't like somebody whose his entire career has been an injury-prone guy. It's just the last couple years for one reason or another. And, I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that he stays healthy for a full season. Again, he's done it 3 times, and next thing you know, he's right back in that kind of double-digit and maybe 12, 13 sack kind of category. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's the Steelers sack leader in 2026.
All right. Why will probably a lot of people, I don't know, maybe not you, maybe I shouldn't use a lot, but why do you think some will push back? And we see it on social media almost every offseason, the last couple as well, too. Why do you think people will push back and say, well, you guys are overrating Alex Highsmith? And why does his name always come up? Obviously you're going to have those that say, man, TJ Watt's making too much money. They should have traded him this offseason or last offseason. But, Alex is you constantly see Alex's name being tossed about in the fan base. Man, they should trade him as well, too. Why? Where's that pushback coming from?
I think it comes from, your best ability is your availability. In the last few years, he hasn't been available consistently. I also don't think he's a flashy player, and not in a negative way. Like he's a quiet producer. He's going to come up with some big plays here and there, but he's not a guy that your eyes are drawn to consistently like a Watt or a Hayward. But I really do think it comes back to the lack of appreciation for Highsmith is due to some of the injury history in recent years. And that can be a little unfair because, as Ross pointed out, he was playing 900 plus snaps consistently until the last few years. And maybe the wear and tear is getting to him, but that's generally the feeling from fans and readers when they talk about wanting to move on from Highsmith is the lack of availability and the price tag that comes with that.
Ross, you want to chime in on that?
Well, I think I agree. I don't know if I have a ton to add there, but I mean, you just look at who came in clutch for the Steelers when it mattered most last year. And you look at the end of the season, Highsmith had 3 sacks over the last 2 games. And there was another stretch where he had 4 sacks over a 2-game span earlier in the season. And I just really think that he's that kind of player, a multi-sack per game, kind of player at times. And I don't understand why people aren't, don't see that. I get the injury thing, but man, when he was healthy, I think it's pretty hard to argue that he wasn't the best, Steelers' best defensive player last year when he was healthy. So I think the Steelers are lucky to have him, and I think he's once again due for a big season.
In a perfect world, I mean, do you agree, especially with Herbig expected to get more snaps and all? Are we looking about maybe a 70 or 75 or maybe even lower than that percent total snap share? Obviously we want all 3 of those outside linebackers to stay healthy for most of the season here, but would it help guys like Highsmith to concentrate on probably playing, say, 70-75% snap of the games, or maybe even as low as some games, maybe 65-68% of all defensive snaps, in an effort to keep those 3 outside linebackers? I know a lot of people want and maybe expect to see all 3 of those outside linebackers on the field at the same time. While I do think that we'll see it more than we saw it last season, and hopefully due mainly to being all 3 of those guys being healthy, I don't know if we're going to reach 10% of all defensive snaps played of having all 3 outside linebackers there. So it's going to be interesting to watch how all 3 of them are utilized. But when it comes to Highsmith's snap total in particular, what's a fair percentage? 70, 75, 65%?
Well, I look at the game. There was 8 games last year. If you kind of toss that Seahawks game where Highsmith exited right away, there were 8 games last year where all 3 were healthy, Herbig, Watt, and Highsmith. And the relative, this is not of the percent of total snaps of the game, but I just kind of looked at their relative snaps to each other. So, all 3, Herbig, Watt, and Highsmith, adding up to 100% of the pie. Here was the split between the 3. Watt, 41.6% of that pie. Highsmith, 36.5% of that pie. And Herbig, 21.8% of that pie. And so, I would expect Herbig to bump up to maybe the 26, 27% range. Where's that coming from? Well, you shave off a couple from Watt, maybe you shave off a couple from Highsmith to protect the health situation, and pretty quickly you have not an equilibrium. It'll probably be the same 1, 2, 3 Watt, Highsmith, Herbig in terms of the snap split there, but I think it could kind of reach a parity a little bit more than it did this last year.
Josh, where do you come in on snap totals? And can these 3 outside linebackers total 38 or more snaps collectively in 2026?
Oh, that's a great question. Ideally, I'd like to see Highsmith in that 65 to 68% range. And same with Watt. You'd like to kind of keep those guys fresh, and especially early in the season. And that allows you to work in Herbig if you're not doing the 3 outside linebacker sets. And that gives Jack Sawyer a chance to play as well. But I do think this is the year with Patrick Graham as DC, and the talk about, wanting to have all 3 on the field. Like it can't just be lip service anymore. It has to happen. He's been a creative guy, meaning Patrick Graham. He's been a creative X's and O's guy throughout his career, and you have to find a way to do it. You're paying all this money. You've invested in an outside linebacker group. You have to find a way to get those 3 on the field, in whatever way it looks, whether that's Herbig playing, floating around in the middle, or it's Watt, or whatever it may be. I struggle to put a number on those snaps. But hopefully it's more than last year, because you can't extend Herbig and be paying all this money to the outside linebacker room and not utilize them properly. And I think that's kind of what's held the Steelers defense back in recent years. Because Herbig, when he's on the field, he's as impactful as they come, but you can't take Watt or Highsmith off the field for extended snaps. So it'll be interesting to see.
What about sack totals for the 3? What are you expecting?
Man, I'd have to do the math. Doing the math quickly. I think Watt comes in around 13. Highsmith, I'll say 9. Herbig around
22.
8.5, 8.5, 9. So around 30, 31.
Okay.
So I think that's reasonable. Um, anything less I feel like would be a disappointment because of how much they've invested there. But 30, 31 feels like a reasonable number for that trio.
All right, Ross, if they hit 35, is that a good season combined sack total?
Yeah, 35 would be a solid number. I maybe that's a really good number of kind of an over under. I think I would take the under, but only slightly. I think if we're looking at like 33 or 34 combined between the three, maybe Highsmith and Watt have like 12 or 13, and then I see Herbig maybe coming in a little under. But I think that's a solid number. 35 would be definitely a positive season. What were they at last year? 24 between the three of them?
Oh, I have to total it up there. What do we say? Highsmith had how many during the regular season?
It's
9,
9.5,
9.5.
Herbig 7.5, Watt 7. So yeah, 24. So 35 would be really good.
All right, so maybe a good number to work with to make people think 34 and a half sacks.
Yeah, I think that's it's
That's a very
ambitious,
fair
but
number.
for what they're paying them, that's fair.
All right, let's move on to the next guy on the 90 and 30 list that I wrote about, Brock Hoffman, and we didn't really talk about him in the offseason additions that the Steelers made. I don't know at this point, maybe if he's kind of the fly under the radar type guy here. Look, when the moment that the Dallas Cowboys decided to not restricted tender Brock Hoffman, I was all in, saying, "Look, this is a guy that they should go after." I know it took a little while there. I know there was a report that he did sign, and then that got retracted. Then he ultimately did sign one year deal, $2.5 million. I think that's a absolute steal when it comes from him for Brock Hoffman based on what he's done so far in the NFL. Do I view him as a every game starter? No, but this is a guy that can play all three interior positions. Has mostly played center during his time with the Cowboys there. He obviously is reunited now with Mike McCarthy there. I don't think there's mystery behind the reasoning behind that. I think he is a clear upgrade over a guy like Ryan McCollum, who has kind of served as the backup center here in Pittsburgh and been kind of a mainstay when he's not on the 53-man roster and being on the practice squad. I just think he's a clear upgrade from a depth aspect. I do expect him to maybe at least get a shot to compete for that starting right guard spot during training camp here. But I know he would probably be disappointed in not winning that right guard spot. But I think he is, I don't want to say premier, but a top level interior swing guy, a guy that obviously we hope Zach Frazier doesn't miss any games, but should he need to spot start in there at center, he's got the experience, and I think he's a guy that can handle that. And then, God forbid he has to come in there and play any snaps at either right or left guard, he can handle that as well too. So as far as outlook, I mean, look, I hope that we're not talking about Brock Hoffman having to play a lot of offensive snaps in 2026, and specifically if he doesn't win the starting right guard spot out of training camp here. But this, I don't want to say this is as quality of an addition as, let's say, a Sebastian Joseph Day on the other side of the football there. But I think this could pay some dividends. God forbid that you get into a situation where he does have to play some snaps in 2026. Am I kind of fair of that in that assessment? I'll go to Josh on you. What's your thoughts on Brock Hoffman? Am I overselling him? Am I underselling him? What do you think about the addition?
No, I think you're properly selling him. He's a guy that I liked, especially after the Cowboys decided to move on. He's someone that can play all three interior positions. He's ideally he's the guy that I would like to see start the season at right guard for the Steelers. As I mentioned earlier, he just brings that physical, nasty edge that this group needs more of, especially if they want to be that power rushing attack that Mike McCarthy has talked about. In an ideal world, he starts the first half of the year at right guard, and Jennings Dunker slides in whenever he's ready, should he get work at right guard in training camp. I do think if Hoffman doesn't win the starting job in training camp, I definitely think he's a guy that could and probably should push Ryan McCollum off the roster, because I think you can get by with Hoffman wearing multiple hats on the interior, whereas McCollum is more center only at this point. I know he's played some guard in the past in preseason with the Steelers, but McCollum compared to Hoffman, I don't think is all that particularly close for what the Steelers are trying to do up front. But again, as you mentioned, if he doesn't win that starting right guard battle, he's not a guy that you want playing extended snaps, because that means someone like Frazier or Mason McCormick has gone down with an injury, and I think that makes the offensive line obviously weaker. But a one-year deal for Hoffman, the experience that he has in McCarthy's scheme, and the style of play that Hoffman brings to the table is kind of that interior brawler, I think is perfect for what the Steelers are looking for, and I'd really like to see him get a fair shake for the right guard position in training camp.
Ross, could they have spent $2.5 million any better with the addition of Brock Hoffman to this team during the offseason? And where do you come
No,
in on him?
I think bang for the buck. You're getting a lot of value out of this, and I know you say you're kind of wouldn't sign yourself up for him starting too many games, and I think in an ideal world that's true, but I think I would prefer him over Spencer Anderson, to be honest,
Okay.
because Anderson's more of your athletic, offensive lineman type, wins a little bit more with finesse than power, and wins with technique, more than power. I think Hoffman's more of your power guy. He's able to move bodies in the run game. He's stout and has a good anchor in the pass game, and that's the kind of guard that I like. And so let me turn this back at you, Dave. I know you like watching guards, and do you view him as somebody between, if your only two options are Anderson and Hoffman, who's your preference to start?
Well, I do like the fact that the way Anderson was used, and if Anderson is not starting, then he can become that extra offensive lineman, fullback, kind of the quasi, H back. We saw all the various roles that Anderson played in. I just look at it from the aspect. I wonder if this team will have more confidence in Anderson, and look, the fact that do you want your backup center out there on the field? All those snaps as well too. I know that's living. It's probably more me living in his fears, and the fact that I have talked so glowingly about Hoffman. Yeah, you could, I can see him, yes, winning that right guard spot. I'm gonna have to see more of him, more, I guess, as a right guard throughout the preseason, and hear about him in training camp to get a little bit more confidence in him. But I think it's quite an expectation and a leap right now to think Jennings Dunker is going to come out of training camp with that job. Not saying that he couldn't, but going from mostly playing right tackle at Iowa, even though he did play some snap, I think there's going to be a transition of him kicking back inside. Now, do I think Jennings Dunker and hope that Jennings Dunker ends up getting the job sooner rather than later and becoming a long time, let's say, right guard for this team? Yes. I don't know how quickly that's going to happen. I guess in the meantime, what are my druthers? I'm just open to it being a competition between Anderson and Hoffman. And I would like the aspect, though, of having Anderson in that familiar role that he was in last year, of being the guy that comes in and being the eligible guy, guy that you can move around on offense. And I don't think you would be doing yourself the favors to have Anderson be your starting right guard, and then as you needed the all extra offensive lineman, making him move around, and if he's going to start at right guard, he needs to be your right guard for 65 snaps during the game there. So I'm not. I guess where I'm at in here is I'm looking forward to the competition, and if Brock Hoffman ends up winning the job, then I'm fine with it. Do I think he can handle the job? Yes, but in the same breath, I think Ross, you kind of hit on this. It does. If there's anything about this offensive line that's a concern, it is what is the makeup going to be on that right side overall. I'm less concerned about the left side because Mason McCormick played quite extensively at left guard in college, and Troy Fautano played obviously extensively at left tackle during college. Those two guys sticking together, regardless of the side of the line that they're on, should be fine there. I do think there's going to be a lot of questions, though, of what happens on the right side of the line, both right tackle and right guard. So I am open. I think Brock Hoffman has can make himself a serious case to be the starting right guard. So yeah, I'm interested to see how that plays out. All right, let's see. Let's move on. Enough talk on Hoffman here, who's obviously we all think is going to be on the 53-man roster at worst as a swing offensive lineman here for him. We'll go to Cole Holcomb, who we talked a little bit about earlier in this show here. The Steelers signed him to a new 2-year, $5 million contract before the start of the 2026 league year in March. He's getting $625,000 in a signing bonus that's fully guaranteed. That comes on the heels of him taking a pay cut last March as he came back from that serious knee injury from 2023. Did not play a lick in 2024. I thought during the 2025 season, he played in 14 regular season games, had almost 200 total defensive snaps. 161 more on special teams. He did miss 3 games last season to whatever that unspecified illness was that he had to deal with there. He did record 37 total tackles, 1 forced fumble. 9 of those 37 tackles that he had last season came on special teams, and that's significant there. While he did not play a ton on defense, I thought when he was on the field, his play was above the line overall at the inside linebacker position. Josh, you tracked missed tackles on him. I think PFF had him at 3. I think you had him probably right around the same line, same number there. I forgot to check on that. I thought his play against it. Look, this is a downhill guy. I thought his play against the run was good, as it has been at any point of his career. Mostly lined up, obviously, in the box when he was on the field, and mostly as part of 2 inside linebacker personnel grouping. Had he not missed the 3 games last season with an illness, he very well could have hit the 450 total tackle mark, and especially knowing what he did on special teams, that would have come along with that. I thought he bounced back nicely for the amount of snaps that he played based on that knee injury that he had. I've talked a lot about Malik Harrison, kind of wondering if this team keeps 4 or 5 inside linebackers in total. I think we all agree Carson Bruner's probably going to be in the mix as at least one of the 4 or the 5 because of his special teams play and the youth that comes along with that, and the kind of the development we think he can make. This could come down to an either or between Holcomb and Malik Harrison. I would give the edge to Holcomb if indeed such a scenario presented itself. Long story short, I really like the chances of Holcomb being on this 53-man roster. He's worn a green dot throughout his NFL career as well, too. And yeah, do I want him starting, 10, 11 games at inside linebacker? No, but I think if it got to that situation, I think, he could probably handle it and handle it quite well. Where do you guys come in at with Cole Holcomb overall, based on kind of the things I presented in the 90 and 30 series?
Well, this is another guy turning 30 any day now, I think, at the end of the month, and coming off the injury. He only played, you said it, like 200 snaps last year, and he really only played, most of those were between week 1 and 8. I think he only played like 47 snaps past that point in the season last year. And so, I don't know what the deal was with the illness, but why did his usage kind of fall off a cliff? I have questions about that. Obviously, Scott McCurley's still the inside linebacker coach. And so, there is a new defensive staff that might want to use him a little differently, but McCurley's still there. And so it might be more similar than we think. And so I do wonder how much on defense he might contribute. Again, as long as Peyton Wilson and Patrick Queen kind of hold up their end of the deal. Holcomb could just as easily play, 200 snaps again as he could play like 500 snaps. I wouldn't be really shocked at either number.
Or 75,
Right. And I think where he does add value is like played quite a few snaps on special teams across a bunch of units, and you called out his special teams tackles. He's a guy who doesn't miss a lot of tackles, which is an asset, especially for some of this inside linebackers that the Steelers have had in recent years. That is a definite asset, not missing tackles. He's not somebody you really want in coverage right now, I don't think. Last year he wasn't great in coverage. He didn't have too many opportunities, but it wasn't, great when he did. And I think just throughout his career, he's been okay, but not great in coverage. And now that he's 30 and past that injury, I think he's really not somebody you want out there too much on pass downs. At least not in the way that the Steelers used to kind of use their inside linebackers. Hopefully that changes a little bit. But he's a solid depth guy. He's a guy that you're happy he's around. I don't know if I would. Is he a lock for the roster right now? Again, you asked about if they're keeping 5, if they're keeping 4. Could one of these guys like Jamin Davis, or I know he's kind of more working with the edges at times, or like a Jacoby Windman who's back on his 3rd stint with the team. Could one of these guys sneak in and surprise in camp? I don't know. I tend to think Holcomb's probably more of a better bet, but I wouldn't necessarily call him a lock right now. I do, again, question why he only played like 45 snaps past week 8 last year.
Josh, where do you come in on Cole Holcomb as a player at this point of his career, and maybe chances of making a 53-man roster?
Yeah, I was surprised that they made that move as quickly as they did in free agency, but I do think he's as close to a lock as possible at this point. I hate to speak in absolutes, but it feels pretty safe at this point that Holcomb's got a spot as that number 3 or number 4 inside linebacker. I think he's a solid, depth piece guy that can come in and be that run defender. I think that's obviously what the Steelers tried to do last year at times, getting Peyton Wilson off the field. They put Cole Holcomb in because he can come downhill, he can play the run. I had him tracked for 4 missed tackles last year. I know you said PFF had 3. I went back and looked while you were saying that. So I think he's a fine piece. If he has to play extended snaps, I think he can handle it. The Steelers can get by. They'll have a good communicator on the field, but he is very, very limited in coverage, especially now that he's past that knee injury. He doesn't have the athleticism he once did. He's a couple years older at this point, but I think he's just a fine piece, and he's dependable on special teams. I know you cited the special teams tackles. I don't consider him in the same breath as a guy like Carson Bruner on special teams, but Holcomb can handle a special teams role as well. But yeah, again, that's a position I would have liked to have seen them upgrade rather than running it back with Holcomb and Harrison. So he's fine at this point in his career. He's neither good nor bad. He's not a huge liability out there, but he's not a guy that's going to move the needle all that much in a positive direction.
I think one of the most interesting aspects as we get into the roster construction moving forward, and did both of you have done 53-man roster predictions? I think at this point, did both of you have Holcomb on the 53?
I did,
have.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
You both did. Did both of you have Malik Harrison on the 53?
Yes, I had all 5 inside linebackers staying on mine. So
I think my most recent, I had no Harrison.
Okay. I think it's going to be interesting, especially when you look at maybe carving out a spot for, I don't know, Eli Heidenreich, or, I'm still not convinced this team keeps 4 quarterbacks in total, but I suppose the argument, some good arguments, and Alex has made good arguments on it. It'd be interesting to see if that happens. Will this team maybe keep an extra wide receiver? What's going to shake out in the running back room? Things along those nature there. But you could realistically draw this thing up, I think, at this point where the team just keeps 4 outside linebackers and 4 inside linebackers to accommodate, another position group or somewhere along those lines there. I think traditionally this team likes to maybe keep 5 inside linebackers. I think a lot of people would probably go that route moving forward here. And if indeed they keep 5, could it indeed come down to a situation where it's Malik Harrison or Cole Holcomb, or
Mhm.
You know, both those guys end up making it as number 4 and 5. I think Holcomb is the better special teams player than, say, Harrison is, but Harrison, I think, gives you more kind of position flexibility because of the ability to rush from the exterior. So there's arguments to be made with both those guys there. But from where I sit right now, I would have Cole Holcomb, I think, on my 53-man roster, and it will be interesting to see how the numbers play out. And look, a lot of times this stuff just comes out in the wash organically, be it due to injuries or a guy might have to go to IR or something like that. So be interesting to watch that. But as of right now, I have Holcomb making my 53-man roster. All right, we got through 390 and 30 series players. There's only really 3 more to get to at this time. I think I'll save those and the ones I'm writing up today moving forward for Alex and I to talk about on the Wednesday show. I think we got through a lot of things here. Let me see if we got anything in the email hopper real quick before we get out of here on this Monday show. No, I'm not seeing anything pressing on the email side of it. So any closing thoughts on as we close out this Monday, Josh or Ross?
The only thing I would throw out in that 5 inside linebacker conversation, and I did bring it up with Alex last week, is Jamin Davis's presence. Now I know he worked at outside linebacker in, I believe, minicamp with the Steelers, but he does have off-ball experience. And I wonder if, the Steelers have talked about versatility a ton this offseason. Could they get into the numbers crunch there and say, oh, okay, we're going to keep 4 inside linebackers, but we'll keep 5 outside linebackers because Davis can flip back and forth, kind of like what Malik Harrison could theoretically do. But that's something that I'm kind of looking at from a 53-man roster building perspective because Davis is a great athlete. He's obviously bounced around the league a ton, but the Steelers saw enough to give him a shot here. So that's just one area I'm kind of looking at that, could they get by with, letting go of a Harrison or, a Holcomb and trying to get Davis to wear multiple hats on that defense.
Ross, any closing thoughts on anything that we've talked about or need to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we diced it up pretty well. Thanks for having us, Dave.
No problem. One final question, real quick, to close thing. I'll play the reader email portion today. And Eli Heidenreich, Josh, I know I shouldn't ask you about Eli. You're real you and have been real bullish on Eli Heidenreich. And the further that you get into his tape and all, good reason behind that. Where are you guys at on Eli Heidenreich potentially making the 53-man roster right now? And Josh, I'll start with you.
I say I still I think it's like 60-40 he makes it. I do think he can be that fourth running back and maybe a kick returner and a special teams piece. Uh, I think obviously he brings more to the table than Caleb Johnson does as a football player, not as a true running back, but as a football player. I don't think Caleb Johnson is cut out for special teams. I don't think he's much of a pass catcher. I think with Heidenreich, yes, it's a cool story, but I think too many people aren't able to get past the local ties and the feel good stuff and realize that this guy is a true football player and can do a lot of things asked of him. Um, I do wonder if maybe his first year he's more ticketed for the practice squad and continues to develop and maybe gets the elevation a few times this season. But if you're asking me today, right now, chances 53-man roster, I think 60-40 is my split where he makes it 60% and 40% he's cut and or waived and sent to the practice squad.
Ross, where do you come in on Eli at this point?
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to flip that on its head and say 40-60 the other way. There's a lot of questions. We've talked about the roster crunch of trying to fit 53 guys on the roster. Are they going to keep 4 quarterbacks? How many of these defensive backs are they going to keep? There's a whole lot of guys in those rooms that they need to keep on the roster. And inside linebacker, you start to wonder how many running backs can they keep? Obviously, Dowdle, Warren are your locks. I'm not entirely convinced that Caleb Johnson is a lock, but I also have a hard time throwing him out as a recent, third round pick. And so if I was running the team, I think I may try to keep somebody like a Heidenreich over Johnson, but I just wonder if the Steelers are gonna move on from him. And then that's not even considering Travis Homer in that equation, a guy who also has a lot of special teams utility and stuff as a depth running back. So how many backs are they going to keep? I just have a hard time finding a definite spot for Heidenreich, especially with some of these other kind of special teams type players that they've added throughout the draft and stuff. Like I have an easier time finding a spot for like a Spears Jennings than I do for a Heidenreich. And especially when you start to consider the special team stuff. I mean, how much you have Weegen on the roster. I mean, my question, like Max Hurleman, do you definitely put Heidenreich above Hurleman in terms of roster chances? I mean, I think that they both
I do. I think man, you go back and look at what Heidenreich did as a receiver, and I just got through writing up Hurlman too, and going through some of his tape and how he was used. Remember, I think a year ago at this time they had him listed as a running back, I think.
Right.
And then they ended up utilizing him more as a wide receiver during the preseason. I know it was a great story, and he stuck on the practice squad, and props to him on that. But I view Heidenreich as a Hurlman on steroids. Just a much better, cleaner version of him. And specifically, even though Heidenreich's listed as a running back, man, what Heidenreich was able to do, as when lined up as a receiver, was really, really significant in my eyes. Now, can he help you some on special teams and along that nature, maybe to the level that maybe a Hurlman can do? I'm not convinced there, but I think Heidenreich is by far the better player than Hurlman, would be my thoughts.
Yeah. Well, if that's the case, I guess maybe you're closer to like 50-50, but I think when it's all said and done, unfortunately, and I think fans seem to be thinking it's more of a 80% for Heidenreich. I think that he's slightly being overrated in terms of his chances right now.
That's kind of where I'm at. As much as I like the guy, like he's not a lock for the roster. He's not
Right.
Christian McCaffrey. You see that too often in our comment section where it's CMC 2.0. Like I think he's a solid player, but it's closer to 50-50 than it is 75-25. And it's going to be a fascinating story to watch. I mean, the guy, it was a very cool moment. Obviously, he had a storied career at Navy, and he's a good football player in general. But yeah, I mean, everything you guys said about the roster crunch is completely fair. Selfishly, I'd as much work as I've put in on him over the years, I'd love to see him stick on the roster, but I completely understand if he's a practice squad guy or if he fizzles out entirely. That's just the nature of this. But yeah, he's a guy that I'm going to be excited to see and read a ton about in training camp.
All right, sounds good there. All right, with that, we'll wrap this segment of the Monday Terrible podcast up. I think we got almost about an hour and 45 minutes in today. I appreciate Ross McCorkle and Josh Carney sitting in for Alex Kozora today. Alex should be back for the Wednesday show with me, and I think at some point before the start of the regular season, we'll have not only Ross and Josh on, but a few other, Joe Clark and maybe a handful of others, sit in on a roundtable session to preview the 2026 Pittsburgh Steelers season there. So, guys, thanks a lot for joining me on this show on this Monday. You can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Josh at by Josh Carney. Ross, what's your Twitter handle?
At Ross_McCorkle.
All right. And follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button and follow the directions that way. So until Wednesday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast today with Ross McCorkle and Josh Carney. Have a great day.